Welcome to the first episode of Inglet Mirror's new playlist titled Literary Mojo. Here, we present most important writers, works, and literary terms which are key to English studies. We hope this will help you to secure your goal in the coming UGC NTA NET exam or SET exam. Let's move on. The Beatles, a group of young musicians from Liverpool whose songs and lifestyle from 1962 until their breakup in 1970 attracted a vast following. Many of their lyrics have been highly praised, and they had a considerable influence on the success of the Liverpool poets and the underground poetry movement. Philip Larkin described their work as an enchanting and intoxicating hybrid of Negro rock and roll with their own adolescent romanticism. John Lennon was murdered in New York in 1980 and George Harrison died in 2001. Believe as you list. A tragedy by Philip Messenger, acted 1631, not published until 1849. The original play was banned because it dealt with recent Spanish and Portuguese history. Messenger ingeniously transferred the story back to the safer days of Roman Empire. The play is a fine study of the recurring conflict between nationalism and imperialism. It was performed by the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2005 as Believe What You Will. The Betrothed, a novel by Walter Scott, published in 1825, the first of Scott's two tales of the Crusaders. His publishers suspended publication while he embarked on the Talisman. The action of the novel takes place entirely on the Welsh marches. The Douglas Tragedy, a ballad included in Walter Scott's Minstrelsy of the Scottish Border, the story of the carrying off of Lady Margaret by Lord William Douglas. They are pursued by her father and seven brothers, who are killed in the ensuing fight. Douglas dies of his wounds and she does not survive him. Dramatic Lyrics, a collection of poems by Robert Browning, published in 1842 as number third of Bells and Pomegranates. Browning's publisher, Edward Moxon, persuaded him to vary the format of the series, which had been intended to consist solely of plays. The collection included some of Browning's best known poems, such as My Last Duchess, Porphyria's Lover, and The Pied Piper of Hamelin. Dramatis Personae, a collection of poems by Robert Browning, published in 1864. A few had been published previously, but most were new. They were marked by Browning's grief after the death of his wife in 1861 and by his searching examination of the relation of human to divine love, especially as it concerns the nature of belief. A striking unity of theme and structure makes the collection an intermediate stage in Browning's development between Men and Women and The Ring and the Book. Several of the poems are anthology favorites, notably Rabbi Ben Ezra and Prospice, but the heart of the collection is the long dramatic monologues such as A Death in the Desert, Caliban upon Setebos, and Mr. Sludge the Medium. A New Way to Pay Old Debts, a comedy by Philip Messenger, acted probably in 1625 to 26, published in 1633. A play deals with the downfall of Sir Giles Overreach, a character based in part on the notorious extortioner Sir Giles Mompesson. The Husband's Message, an Old English poem of 53 lines in the Exeter Book, one of the group usually called elegies. Its ostensible form is a message to a woman from her husband who has had to leave his own country because of a feud, telling her of his prosperity in another land and asking her to join him. Hydriotaphia, Urn Burial. Hydriotaphia, Urn Burial by Sir Thomas Browne, published with The Garden of Cyrus, 1658. A skeptical meditation on human form in magnificent Baroque prose, inspired by some burial urns excavated in Norfolk. It has been admired by many writers, including James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and George Louis Borges. A Room of One's Own. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, a key work of the feminist movement, published in 1929 and based on two lectures on women and fiction that Woolf delivered in Cambridge in 1928. It begins with a visit of the imaginary Mary Button to an imaginary Oxbridge College, where she feels a complete outsider. Woolf goes on to describe the educational, social, and financial disadvantages against which women have struggled throughout history, arguing that women will not be able to write well and freely until they have privacy and financial independence. She pays tribute to women writers of the past, to women's achievements in the form of the novel, and projects a future in which increasing equality would enable women to become not only novelists but poets. In the last chapter, she discusses androgyny, perhaps a mind that is purely masculine cannot create any more than a mind that is purely feminine. The Portrait of a Lady, a novel by Henry James, published in 1881, which describes the marriage of an idealistic heiress, Isabel Archer, to an American dilettante expatriate, Gilbert Osmond. He marries her for her fortune and ruins her life, but she remains loyal in spite of her realization of his vileness. Praeterita, which means things past, unfinished autobiographical work by John Ruskin, published in 28 parts and at intervals between 1885 and 1889. Ruskin had no interest in giving a complete account of his life, as he admits. Instead, he writes about what it gives me joy to remember at any length I like, and passing in total silence things I have no pleasure in reviewing. His last work, it is a lyrical and fragmentary evocation of the past, particularly the lost landscapes of his childhood and the growth of his intense visual imagination. Presbyterianism, a church system overseen by a governing hierarchy of four courts: parochial, local, regional, and national, championed by English Puritans. The term comes from the New Testament Greek word rendered presbyter or elder in Protestant English Bibles, but priest in Roman Catholic translations. The Westminster Assembly of Divines, summoned by the Long Parliament in 1643, issued a set of enduring Presbyterian formularies, directories of church government and public worship, a confession of faith, and larger and shorter catechism, but a national Presbyterian church was never established in England as it had been in Scotland. The Prime Minister, a novel by Anthony Trollope, published in 1876, fifth in the Palliser series. this austere novel was not among Trollope's popular successes. The Prisoner of Chillon, a dramatic monologue, principally in rhymed octosyllabics by Lord Byron, written in 1816 after a visit with P.B. Shelley to the castle of Chillon on Lake Geneva, and published in the same year. It deals with the imprisonment there of the Swiss patriot Francois de Bonivard. The Professor, a novel by Charlotte Bronte, written in 1846, that means before Jane Eyre, but not published until 1857. The story is based, like Willet, on the author's experiences in Brussels. William Crimsworth, an orphan, goes to seek his fortune in Brussels. At the girls' school where he teaches English, he falls in love with Francis Henry, an Anglo-Swiss pupil teacher and Lay's mentor, whose Protestant honesty and modesty are contrasted with the manipulating duplicity of the Catholic headmistress, Shiride Rooter. Crimsworth resists Mill Rooter's overtures, resigns his post, and is able to marry the firm-minded Frances. They establish a school together and eventually return to England. Hogarth Press. Hogarth Press, founded in 1917 by Leonard Woolf and Virginia Woolf at their home Hogarth House, Richmond, Surrey, mainly as a hobby. The earliest publications included Catherine Mansfield's Prelude, published in 1918, Virginia Woolf's Kew Gardens, published in 1919, and T.S. Eliot's Poems, published in 1919. The policy was to publish new and experimental work. They also published translations of Maxim Gorky, Anton Chekhov, Leonid Tolstoy, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Ivan Bunin, Rainer Maria Rilke, and Italo Savavo. They introduced the work of Robinson Jeffers, J.C. Ransom, and E.A. Robinson into England. In 1924, they moved to Tavistock Square, where John Lehman became assistant and then part owner. In 1947, Lehman's share in the press was bought by Chatto and Winters. Since 1987, the Hogarth Press has been of Random House. Peter Grimes. Peter Grimes, a tale in George Crabbe's The Burrow. Grimes is a fisherman who fished by water and who flinched by land. Forbidden to keep apprentices, after several die under his ill treatment, he lives and works alone. Guilt maddens him, and he dies after enduring imagined terrors. He is the principal figure in Benjamin Britten's opera Peter Grimes. Magnificence, a morality play by John Skelton. Magnificence, symbolizing a generous prince, is ruined by mistaken liberality and bad counselors, but restored by good hope, perseverance, and other similar figures. The Mask of Anarchy, a poem of political protest by P.B. Shelley, written in response to the Peterloo massacre at St. Peter's Fields in Manchester in August 1819, published in 1832. Composed at speed and in anchor, the poem uses the popular ballad form with immense power and sometimes surreal effect. The Mask is a pageant or masquerade of British political leaders, whom Shelley blames not only for the killing of 11 people and injuries to around 500 others at a public demonstration for parliamentary reform, but also for the general conditions of harshness and oppression in England. What he calls the triumph of anarchy. Anarchy rides on a horse, he was pale even to the lips like death in the apocalypse. His bloody progress is only prevented by hope. A maniac maid who throws herself under the tumbling hoofs. The poem ends with a celebration of freedom. The Massacre at Paris. A play by Christopher Marlowe, written around 1592. The play deals with the massacre of Protestants in Paris on Saint Bartholomew's Day, 24 August 1572. Its most memorable character is the Machiavellian Duke of Guise. The massacre is depicted in a series of short episodes, a notable one being that in which the rhetorician Ramus is killed after a verbal onslaught by the gaze on his Lamentations of Aristotle. The Guise himself is eventually murdered on the orders of Henry III. Leaping over 17 years, the play concludes with the murder of Henry III and the succession of the then Protestant Henry of Navarre. Maud, a poem by Alfred Tennyson, published in 1855. It is a monodrama in sections of different meters in which the morbid narrator describes the progress of his emotions. First, describing his father's death and his family's ruin, both contrived by the old lord of the whole, then expressing his growing love for Maud, the old lord's daughter, and the scorn of her brother, who wishes her to marry a vapid new made lord. He secures a meeting with Maud, but they are interrupted and her brother is killed in the subsequent fight. He escapes abroad, goes mad, and finally reawakens to apparent hope in fighting in the Crimean War. There was much contemporary debate as to whether it was pro or anti war. Tennyson insisted that it was first and foremost dramatic. It was always his favorite poem to read aloud. Thank you for watching this video. If you like the video, please share and subscribe.